Welcome, everybody, to the Tuesday Night Smite podcast. The podcast on Tuesday at night or evening for at least one person here, and about Smite. That name fits really well, doesn't it? My name is Robert. Yeah?
We had to restart for that.
Yeah, do you have anything better? See, I need constructive criticism.
I gotta do your job for you, huh? Okay. Let's just keep going.
Yeah. As I was going to say, my name is the Robbie Dog. I'm joined today by Sabo, who you've already heard. And today we're recording episode 21. Our episode going over the false split gauntlet. I want to say split, but that's not a word. False split gauntlet. We're doing a quick recap of that because it obviously happened last weekend. And yeah, there's some stuff to talk about. And I say we should just jump right in to the EU side. And I promise to make the first two sets quick. So let's talk about those. Let's talk about Saturday on the EU side. What happened? Without going into too much detail.
Well, Burrito 2-0 Victoria's Secret, and then the Poppies took Burrito down in 3 games. That was pretty much the summary of EU's Saturday. Victoria's Secret, though, in the 2 games set against Burrito, there were some upsides, right? They had a good showing, weren't able to outlast Burrito and really put themselves in a spot where their early game can transition well to maybe they could take a game off of Burrito in the late.
Yeah, I think that is this team's big issue, or at least it was their big issue this weekend.
Realistically, that's every Challenger Cup team or Challenger Circuit team's biggest issue is that transition from the mid into the late game, because these SPL teams understand how to play a late game better than these Challenger Circuit teams that just don't get that experience every week.
Yeah, or at least not against the same caliber of teams that the SPL teams are playing, right? If you're Burrito, you've now been in the late game against a team Dignitas at 4 times probably, or at least 2 times, right?
At least 4.
Well, unless they get stomped completely, which I think that happened in at least one of their games.
Well, they've been in the league for 2 splits now, and they've had to face Dignitas at least twice each split.
Yeah,
so they've had at least 4 game experience against Dignitas and Obey and these top EU teams.
Yeah, and I think what matters more specifically is the late game experience you have against these teams, and you might not get that in every game, right? Because you're still a low seed team against one of these high seeds, so they might just completely wipe you in like 15 minutes or more or less. But yeah, overall, that experience lead that Burrito has, I think, really showed in this set. And it showed in how they managed to stay in games when Victoria's Secrets was putting on pressure and was trying to force them out of the game, and just wasn't able to do it, in part because they are inexperienced, and in part because Burrito has learned how to fight losing games or fight even games, I think.
Yeah, I think this matchup next season in that Challenger Circuit should be a good one to watch as we see Victoria's Secret grow against teams with this SPL experience like Burrito and Poppies that will be joining them down there. The only issue I see with this is they're not. Burritos and Poppies are, yes, they're technically SPL teams, but they're the low part of the SPL teams. So they're going to be able to take that experience they have into the Challenger Circuit next year. And if Victoria's Secret gets the experience of playing against Burrito and the Poppies, and they stay together, I think it'll be a good matchup to watch, especially when we get into the LAN and settings for the Challenger circuit next year, when we might see this team again at a LAN sometime in Season 5.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we don't even need to really look at the team development and the development of individual players now, right? Because relegations will be gone in Season 5, so there will be no way for this Victoria's Secret's roster to make it into the SPL as a whole unit anymore, at least not most likely, right? Unless they...
Not next season. They'll have a shot in Season 6, but players like Spudio, I've been impressed with him as a hunter. Julio69 has been really good in that solo lane row. I really like those two players individually.
Yeah.
And I could see them possibly getting called up to the SPL by one of these other teams. But who are you going to replace? Somebody retires. I don't know. You might see one of those two people get pulled up. But much like Final K and Vedium, who actually belong in the league, it's going to be hard to replace some of these players in the SPL unless they retire or they just flat out fall off a cliff in their play style or in their ability.
Yeah. Yeah, I think especially in those two roles, we've got a lot of players that are really good compared to probably the rest of the roster, right? Just look at the hunter role, for instance, and look at the people that are there on the sort of bottom three teams in EU, outside of obviously Poppies and Burrito. You're looking at Emilito, you're looking at Germain, and you're probably looking at Funball. And it's going to be hard for Spudio, right, to compete with those guys still, unless he improves drastically and they do not manage to sort of match his improvement. But overall, yeah.
If one of them retire, which might happen, we've seen some retirements out of nowhere, Omega being one of them. Spudio to me should be that first player at the Challenger Cup level to look at, because I don't think Kaspanify or Warchi are going. Maybe I can't say that anymore because of the money that's involved in Season 5, but just individual players, Warchi and Draco Marino, Kaspanify and Fustify, they're kind of to me, they're married to each other, right? Like much like Frostyak and Shadow Nightmare were. You're not going to get one without the other. And so Spudio being just an individual player and not a part of a established dual lane, I think gets him a look over the other two, because you can bring him in and pair him with somebody like Big Man Tings or Iraf or you don't have to train an entire new way of thinking because it's already there. He's already used to having supports kind of rotate in and out of who's on the team this week. So
yeah, I think that's an interesting dynamic, is the fact that we have Poppies as a roster, right? And Poppies, obviously a Spanish roster, so it's hard for any player to really move out of that if he's been used to just purely receiving calls in Spanish instead of in English, like most other teams tend to call. And then Burrito, I don't think as a roster of just individual players are really strong enough to advance to other rosters, right? I would give someone like a Spudio a leg up on a guy like Kaspanify, because we just haven't seen much from Kaspanify in the SPL even, and that's not too impressive. It's not given other teams much of a reason to really pick him up. So yeah, what it really boils down to, I think, for this roster, for Victoria's Secrets, is they have individual players that can improve, and if the circumstances are right, then they might be able to find their way into the SPL. But we'll really have to wait and see if that actually does happen. Yeah. Do you have anything left to say about this set, or do you want to move on to the next one?
No, I think we can move on now.
Yeah, so the other set we had was a rematch from the last week of the SPL. Another exciting one. Poppies against Burrito.
Turned out to be the same result as last week.
Yeah.
We had a 3-game set between these teams last week, and Poppies took that one and this one 2-1. Yeah, you could have just hit record on the games last week and replayed them here, because that's exactly what happened.
Can you imagine if they did that at some point? Just showed. Look,
I mean,
like this season, imagine if they actually replayed the same set from the week 5 of the SPL in this Gauntlet, and see if anyone would have noticed.
Who's watching the Poppies versus Burrito anyway?
Hey, I did. I had to post the post-match discussion of that set, man.
But like, we might be the only ones who noticed. Who would have noticed?
Oh, I would love that. They should totally try that. I just like that idea so much right now. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, go ahead.
I do like Drelo playing the RDO jungle, which I believe it was in game 2, right?
Yeah, gave her another loss for RTO, I believe. She hasn't got too many wins, but she has a lot of losses now. Surprisingly enough, right?
Not as strong as everybody thinks she is. She's a good, strong early game character, because she has so many abilities. Being a stance switcher, her early to mid game's really good. Unless you're building like full damage or full cooldown, so that you can get multiple stuns and multiple what she's able the multiple CC forms in her kit. She's not really a huge late game threat unless you're Benji. That's more of a combination between the player and the god.
Yeah, it's the role she fills best, I think. In general, not just because it's Benji, even because Benji plays a role, but because she really is more of a frontliner and more of a... She plays like a warrior, basically. That's the main point I'm trying to get across, is she is in your face, she is damaging you, and it might not completely kill you outright, but it's going to whittle you down, and then you're going to be easy cleanup for whoever ends up coming in. Issue I see with running her in the jungle is that that's not the role of a jungler, that's the role of a solo laner. And while you have warrior jungles, they generally still have a similar purpose to the traditional assassin jungle, just with a bit more tankiness and with a bit more CC and less damage instead.
And I see why she's more favored in the solo lane over the support, because she's really good with these selfish items. The supports are usually building for team-oriented base, trying to help the rest of your team do stuff. Solo lane's a little bit more selfish.
Yeah.
And so you'll see the reason why I think she was put in the jungle is because she can still build selfish in the jungle, and you still have that front line from the solo lane, or that third front liner from the solo lane. So I understand the concept. I don't. Obviously, it didn't work, but it was still something interesting and fun to watch.
Yeah. See, the issue I have with it is, I think with this comp that you don't have enough pick potential to a certain extent, right? Because the pick potential is going to be what is really going to allow you to fight in the early and mid game and to sort of establish a lead there and try to carry that on into the late game. And Artio, out of the solo lane role, I think she can do that because she's going to have a jungler who has that pick potential and where she can end up coming in and picking people off and then just chasing them out of fights with the bear dash. As a jungler, I don't think she has it, and I think that's part of what led them to lose this match, because they were not able to really finish off the game, it seemed like. And then Burrito just ended up coming back because they also had a comp that was great late game, and well, Artio was not that great, and while the rest of the comp may have been, I think Artio was a bit of a weak point in that regard.
And we did see Johnny build, or we did see Johnny play the Nemesis, which a lot of these teams that end up playing against an Artio like to pick. I'm assuming that's because she shreds frontliners and Artio is a frontliner. But for the most part, when we see Artio in the game, with a few exceptions here and there throughout the split, we'll see a Nemesis in response.
Yeah, I think that's part of her weakness, right? As this sort of close range guardian that she is, she really needs to be in the face of other people, while they're not necessarily hard CC'd all the time, so she can have damage dealt back to her, and if her protections are reduced by a Nemold or by just the natural shred coming out of carries of the other team, right? An AMC is going to shred for you quite heavily, as well as a Vulcan with his turret who's just going to keep putting out damage.
And Nemesis is going to just make that 10 times worse when she also takes your protection.
Yeah, away. Exactly. And then she can really struggle, Artio.
You made the point of saying that Artio is a front line, like she wants to be in the thick of the enemy team to be able to do her job. If you're in the thick of the enemy team and you get Nemesis ult and all your protections are stripped, the focus of the entire enemy team suddenly turns to you, and you're dead in 3 or 4 seconds. Like,
yeah. And yeah, I think that's one great way you can deal with Artio, right? I think her big issue is going to be if she is allowed to be in your face and to damage you and to just stay there and tank damage, do whatever else she wants. And I think there are great ways you can prevent her from doing that. One is through extreme shred comps that are just going to reduce her protections to basically 0. Right? Look, again, Nemesis ult, 30%. Put an Executioner on top of that. You're looking at 66% reduced protections. What do? Put a Stone-Cutting Sword on top of that. You're suddenly looking at... How many would it be? I don't know. I don't even need to know. It's just going to destroy her. And that's what... Yeah.
66% reductions in protection against an AMC and a Vulcan. You're just not going to live that long.
Yeah. And then I think the other big way you can deal with her is with the type of CC that Ares ult is, right? Or Xingqian ult, something like that, because she has no innate CC immunity. Most stance switchers don't. Just like Uller, right? And if you can manage to actually put a long chain CC on her, which is easier against her than against most other Guardians, because most other Guardians have that innate CC immunity on their ults, you can will her, or you can kill her before she comes out of that long CC chain that you're putting her into. And I think that's a big tool as well for you to deal with her. And we'll get to that a bit later on, honestly. I want to talk about that in another set. But yeah. Well, overall...
But yeah, the Poppies did end up taking the 2-1 victory over Burrito. And if you ask me, it was a little bit more one-sided than it appeared to be. I think the Poppies were in complete control, except for that one game in Game 2, where the RDO jungle didn't actually work out for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a case of all games starting off in a similar way, right? With Poppies being sort of in the driver's seat and Burrito trying to stay in all of them, but only managing to do it in one, in part because of the composition that we talked about. I think if both teams go into the late game even, we could see Burrito taking this, but that's not something that Poppies is usually going to let you do. For the most part, they are going to get the win because they are the better team overall. And even then, if a guy like Warchi goes off in the late game, you are still going to have a hard time beating them. And that's obviously what happened as well in the last game of the set.
And I know Warchi is known for his ROM, but he had to play Ho Yi, I think, in every game this set, and actually performed pretty damn well on the Ho Yi as well. So
he played Hu Yi in the first game, Scotty in the second, and Amuls and Cobb in the third.
Did he play? Did he play Ho Yi in all 3 games against Energy then?
Let me check.
Because I know he played a whole lot of. I think I remember him playing.
Yeah, he did.
Ho Yi a lot this weekend.
Yeah, he played it in the set against Energy. Yes, all 3 games. So yeah, talking about that set, should we move on to it, or do you have any points we want left to make about this Poppies against Burrito set?
No, I have nothing to say anymore.
Good. See, we only wasted 20 minutes on that. It's not too bad.
Yeah, but in those 20 minutes, 50% of our viewers have already stopped listening.
I'm gonna put a timestamp in the video description. They can just skip ahead to this part.
We got 10 viewers and 5 of them are already tuned out.
Damn it. Let's tune back in, guys. Okay. Because the next set we saw was a good one. Energy against Poppies. The second to last set of the Gauntlet. And yeah, it was surprisingly close.
It was definitely the best EU set this weekend.
Yeah.
And Poppies in game 1 baited out the Ares pick from Raffer, which I don't think was a great pick. I mean, look at the bans. I think they banned Fafnir, Geb, and was it Terra that was banned, and then there was one more Guardian that was banned, and really...
Yeah, they banned Artio, Circuits, Sylvanas, and Sobek. So all of Raffer's picks.
Well, yeah, Ardio's given, so like you're probably going to ban Ardio, so I wasn't thinking of Ardio, but like they banned a lot of Raffer's picked and really forced him on the Ares with Drelo already having the Kabrakan in the jungle.
Yeah. And
you saw the game plan was when Raffer comes in and ults, immediately put up that wall behind him where, Energy's not going to have the follow-up that they want. That some of these abilities will go through those walls, but you're really trapping the Ares in the middle of your team alone with very little backup. And so I believe he died like 9 or 10 times in that game, and that was really the focus of the Poppy.
It was 12 times, actually.
I tuned out after 9.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, look, he died again. Okay. I'm stopping. I'm not counting it anymore. I'm just, oh, he died again. But the game plan was very obvious from the Poppies in game 1, and it was a really strong showing from them in game 1. And they did play game 2 and 3 well, but we got to see the adapting that we thought we were going to see at the beginning of the year.
Yeah. Well, we had seen him quite a lot during the year as well, right? He was good in the summer split. I can't say if he was that good in the spring because my memory doesn't go back that far, to be honest. If I don't remember, he probably wasn't too good in that split. But yeah, in set one, he also didn't look good, but I felt it was more because Poppy's built into a heavy lead and he wasn't really able to find anyone in the backline anymore on the Camisards. In games 2 and 3, as you said, he looked great. He was, again, probably the main carry for this team, at least stats-wise, like it usually is with him.
Energy now, this current form of energy is based around adapting and him playing well.
Yeah.
And the other team like that in the league is also the team that won the NA Gauntlet this weekend, and both of these teams are really based around their junglers playing well. They do it differently, but they're both so important to their teams, and the fact that we got to see adapting, and I believe he played Thanatos in game 3.
Yeah, he did.
When they needed him. And we know that's a pick he's going to look for if he feels like he needs it. It's one of his go-to picks. Fenrir and Thor being the other two that come to mind when I think of him adapting. But, yeah, it's just getting away from the Osiris jungles and the Robin jungles and the Kukulkan jungles and putting him back on a hard carry assassin like a Thanatos is. The team of energy looks infinitely better when he's able to do that.
Yeah, I think. See, the reason I think that these assassin jungles are especially risky nowadays is because of really what we saw in game 1, right? He was not able to kill people in the mid to late game because he was not ahead. If he gets ahead, which he did in games 2 and 3, he can easily do that. And that's when it works out for energy, and that's the other example of game 1 is when it doesn't work out. And overall, I think running assassins in the jungle right now is a bit more of a volatile, or is making your team a bit more volatile than the other picks that our junglers may be running.
But a player like adapting volatile is not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, sure. Usually, like in the summer, I would totally agree with you. From what we've seen in the fall, adapting as a player has been too inconsistent for me to say that I think energy can reliably rely on him. And I think that's still the big thing that worries me about this team.
I agree. I think he's been too inconsistent in this fall split to really put that on his shoulders. Really put the team on his back, because he's not he's not the best player in the world anymore. But he has shown glimpses of that old form that we all have come to expect from him, and why I say volatile for adapting is not necessarily a bad thing, because we've seen him on the warrior jungles. We've seen him struggle mightily on the warrior jungles. If he has that carry potential on the assassin jungles, then just keep giving him the assassin jungles, whether it works out or not. It's where he's the best at, and where he has been considered the best player in the world for 2 years on these assassin jungles. So don't put him on something that's maybe he's not comfortable on, which it's adapting. He's probably comfortable on everything, but if you ask me, when it comes to adapting, damn the meta and just let the guy play whoever he wants to play.
Yeah, I can see that. I think energy is proven by now that if they run adapting on a warrior, if they put adapting on a warrior, they are not going to look good in the game. They might still win it based on a miracle performance by someone else in another lane, which don't happen regularly enough for me again to rely on them. I think that's the main difference I see between him on warrior jungles and him on assassin junglers. On assassin junglers, if he doesn't get a lead, he can easily end up just not having a big impact in the game. On warrior jungles, he's just not going to have a big impact in the game. Period. So that's what Energy needs to do, is really put him on assassins. I totally agree with that. It's the only way that I see them winning games against the other big European teams. I don't think warriors are going to work for them at all. Sabo?
Yeah, I mean, I said that already.
Yeah.
There's nothing to add. I've already said it.
So yeah, what is there to add? Is there anything else to add? I mean, the rest of the team looked good as well, right? At least they look good, and adapting looked really good, I guess is what you can say.
Let's shift the focus a little bit to the Poppies.
Yeah, good idea.
They had a strong weekend. Let's give them credit for that. But Aggro tweeted out, and I think he put it the best when he said one strong weekend doesn't make up for months of poor play in the split. And the Poppies, a lot of people were saying, or the consensus was that the Poppies deserved a spot in the SPL, and I agree with Aggro. They played good for this one weekend, and they proved that they can play with these teams like Energy, but we didn't see it consistently enough from them throughout the split, both summer and the fall split, that it's to anybody saying the Poppies belong. I don't know where you're coming from, because there's not enough evidence to show that. Anybody can get lucky on one weekend and have just a great season 2 enemy, for example, had great 2 months and came in second at Worlds, where before Super Regionals that year, they were lucky to finish 6th and make it to Super Regionals.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it depends on how you look at it, right? What worries me about Poppies, or why I would say that they do not necessarily deserve the spot, is because right now, if I compare Poppies at the start of summer to the sixth SPL team at the start of summer, which would have been Elevate, and compare them to the 6th team in the SPL now, which, looking at the Gauntlet, would be Valence. We're going to get to that later on, but I do not see how they have improved, or how they've gotten closer, how they've closed the gap between them and the other SPL teams. And the same is true for Burrito. Obviously, they're still behind Poppies, obviously. So there is a clear gap between 6th and 7th place in the EU SPL, I think. And if you consider that, and if you consider how close the top 6 are, or at least the middle 4 are, I think you can say that they do not deserve to be in the SPL.
Yeah, they're in Europe, at least. There is a bigger gap between 6 and 7 than there is in A.
Yeah, just look at the standings at the end of the split, right? For instance, you have Energy at 7 points in 6th place.
Even with the eye test, it's clearly a team like Cryptic, who new roster halfway through the split. That didn't help at all, because this new roster actually is a good roster and probably deserves to be in the league over somebody like Vigilant's current roster. But that being said, Poppies is not a team that's really built to compete with Vigilant, right? I mean, or not Vigilant, but Cryptic. Cryptic. Both of them are the 7th place teams. That's why I'm comparing these two teams. They're 7th place teams in their region. Cryptic looks better in their losses than the Poppies do. And so, that being said, Cryptic had a bad weekend, but it's also Squadron also had a great weekend, so we can't really look too much into that. Poppies had a good weekend, but like Burrito and Victoria's Secret weren't going to really. We could see Burrito beating them, but given their past history, the Poppies clearly had the edge in that. So, just comparing the 7th place teams in each region, I think there is a closer gap between Vigilant and Cryptic than there is with Poppies and Valence.
Yeah, definitely.
So if you're going to make this argument about any team, it needs to be about Cryptic and not Poppies.
Yeah. And like I said at the start of summer, I would have supported potentially an 8-team EU SPL, but there hasn't been enough improvement from either of those two teams, Poppies and Burrito. And I think it's worth saying as well, the two other teams that are below the middle in EU right now, which are Valence and Energy, they are mostly there because they're inconsistent, right? Poppies on a good day can beat Energy on a terrible day, and Valence on a good day is going to stomp Poppies on a bad day. And that's why I think it might in some games look like there is less of a gap than there actually is, because those teams are notably inconsistent right now. But overall, obviously, the gap is still massive. And yeah.
Well, but moving to the most inconsistent team in probably all of the league, that's Valence. I don't know if there's really an argument for that. Valence is, I mean, without Allegiance being in the league anymore, Valence is now the most inconsistent team there is.
I mean, Allegiance not even inconsistent; they're just bad.
Fair point. But
they were inconsistent in the summer. Now they're not that inconsistent.
Valence can look good, look great in one week, and then just look like my silver ranked games where nobody has a clue what's going on, and people are running into 5 people trying to steal a red camp and shit like that. It's kind of confusing to see that kind of stuff from a SPL team with players like Funmuller and Lobster and Fails and Big Man Ting and no, it's Ducky, not No Numbers. No Numbers is on Elevate.
Yeah.
But you expect more of a consistent level of play from these players, and it's kind of frustrating to see on a good Valence day matched up against Energy. Maybe they win the Gauntlet, but Valence did not have a good Sunday. They just looked out of their league against Energy in that 2-game. And yes, it was technically a 3-game set, but it's a 2-0 for Energy, so it never got to a third game. And I said it was one-sided in the Poppies and Burrito for 2 of those 3 games. It was very one-sided in Energy's favor.
Yeah, it didn't look like Valence had much of a chance in that set, and I think in part it's because we saw the good version of Energy show up in both games, right? Like we talked about, adapting, going off on the assassins. But also because the Valens that showed up with their inconsistency, it was more towards the latter category that you mentioned, looking like silvers. And that's what made it a complete blowout this set. They didn't stand a chance in it, really.
Yeah, I'm going to say something controversial here, but Lobster has to be removed from this team.
See, there's exactly one reason. There's an additional reason to the performance that you're thinking about. Because Lobster's the only member on the team who's not British.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not really what I was getting at, but
yeah, I know. It's the other reason.
Little tidbit. That's a good little tidbit, I guess. Just Lobster hasn't done anything this season to say he has any real reason to be in the SPL other than he's just on a team.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff he has tweeted out over the past 3 months doesn't give you the best impressions of him as a player right now. It seems that he is really struggling and really salty with this how the game is currently playing out. And yes, that's just him tweeting out his frustrations. But even at just the eye test of watching their games throughout the season, he just hasn't really done it. He hasn't really done it for me.
Yeah.
He's probably out of the top 6 mid laners in EU. He's probably number 6.
Yeah, and that's surprising considering one of those mid laners is Death Panther.
Yeah, I wasn't. If you want to throw Farrakirk into Mr. Nazer, which right now for my money, I'm taking Mr. Nazer over Lobster.
Yeah, maybe.
If I drafted a team, I would probably take Mr. Nazer over Lobster.
Yeah. See, the thing, I think a part of the reason why, or I think how you can see that Lobster's not having an impact in this game is because the entirety of Valence is not looking like the thing that Lobster should bring to a team, right? Lobster in the past has always been the guy who will be consistent, who will consistently play decently, and sometimes have big games. That's what he's done during the entirety of his time on TSM, all the way back in Season 0 and 1. That's what he's done all the time he was on the Paradigm/Orbit roster.
Throughout his career is what you're getting at.
Yeah. Right now, how can a team that has a quote-unquote consistent mid look so inconsistent? Right, because to me that shows that he is not bringing that consistent form anymore. And that's what worries me, or that's why I think you can easily make the argument that he should be removed. Because right now he's probably the worst player on this team. Him or Ducky.
I think we've seen Lobster go down the Incon path, where he just hasn't improved enough with the changes in the meta to really justify him being on a team. Incon at the height of his popularity and at the height of his career was one of the best supports in the league. Did a lot of the things for that AFK roster that made them such a good team. And Lobster was there at one point, TSM and Orbit. He was a big integral part of those teams. But as it's gone by and the time has passed, he just hasn't improved enough with the current changes. And now you have people that are better than him because they're more more adaptable to the changing of the meta.
Yeah. I don't know what there is to say about Lobster
It's
outside of that.
it's the perception of Incon is that he's stalled out. He's not reaching a plateau that he's not improving as much as other players would with the passing of time. Lobster has fallen into that same discussion for me. Because there was a time where a lot of people considered him better than Zyros, better than Pretty Prime, better than Shadow Nightmare, and that's not the case anymore. I think Nulissa and Mr. Stefan are better mid laners right now than Lobster is.
Yeah, that might be. And yeah, I think that's an interesting point, right? If Lobster's level has gone down or has not kept up with the other players, you're no longer looking at a mid that is consistently decent. You're now looking at a mid that's just consistently below average. And in that case, that's what he's for the most part gonna look like. And then at that point in time, it makes sense to bring in an average player who has ups and downs, but his ups are going to be much higher than Lobster's ups.
I feel dirty for saying it, but he's a lot like Vivian, in the fact that he's only on the team because he's the captain.
See, that's why Wayland's needs to find an org, man.
Like, in all honesty, the only reason I can see Lobster still on this team is because he's the captain. And
yeah.
For the most part, that was the only reason Vivian was on that Cryptic team for as long as he was, or that A Mighty Storm team for as long as he was, because he was the captain. And
see, that's an interesting topic right now. If he leaves,
I don't want to say Lobster is the same kind of person in that he's as shitty of a human being as Vivian is. But I think if he wasn't the captain of this team, he would probably not be on this team for the fall split.
Yeah. That's an interesting thing, though. If he's not just the captain, right? Or at least in previous teams, he wasn't just the captain. He was also the actual leader of the team who would tell you what to do, would tell what to do to the rest of his players, right? I think there were a lot of paradigm comms that we got to listen into, and they mostly consisted of everyone else: Trix, Funball, QO, and Sadia. Just being super excited about having killed 3 people, and then Lobster saying, "Let's go to Fire Giant."
And that's another point. Look at the players he was playing with this time last year. Cubo and Trix moved on to a team, and they're in a better spot. They're arguably better players now than they were last year.
Yeah.
Zelia moves on or gets removed from the team for Ducky, and then joins Obey for the fall split. And he's arguably better than he was at any point on that Orbit team last year.
Yeah.
The players that have moved on from him, from a Lobster team, have gotten better. And I know that he wasn't on the team for very long, but Cherio is another guy that I can think of that moved on from a Lobster team to a better situation and became a better player. Which I'm not making the statement that those two are related, but it's something to think about.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they are related. What I really want to talk about then is if he is the leader of this team, which I think he might very well be, and the shot caller of this team, that could be another reason to keep him, because if you look at the rest of the roster, who is going to take over?
Fails maybe, and I don't know if Fails is that kind of player, but
Yeah.
The jungle position is usually the one that comes to mind when it comes to shot calling. So
Yeah, it's generally going to be one of the tricolor of a
Fails,
team, basically.
I think Fails would be the obvious choice. I'm not sold on big man things either, but I'm willing to give a support player because of their role a little bit more leeway than I am some of the other roles that have such huge impacts on the game. Yes, big man teams has not impressed me in his 2 years in the league, but he's been a support for both of those years, and teams are keeping him on. You know, he's staying on it in the pro league because the teams obviously see something there. So
Yeah, see, what I think is the other players on this team are largely solid. Ducky probably being the next lowest after Lobster, but potentially there's not really a lot of players who could replace him right now. I feel like, unless Dimmy wants to make a combat back.
That goes back to what we said earlier about Spudio and Julio 69.
Yeah.
Is Julio better than Ducky? I don't think so. But, you know, he definitely deserves a look at. You know, he's definitely an option if they want to move on from Ducky. I mean, it's going to be hard to replace these players that are already established in their roles, especially with a role that is as deep as the hunter role is in that EU, and the solo lane is fairly deep too, but it's not as deep as the hunter role. So
yeah,
Ducky, no numbers. I mean, got to look at maybe one of those two guys. If you're thinking of somebody like Julio 69, and if he's going to be able to find a team, well, Duckies and no numbers are the two, the lowest. I think the lowest rated solo laners in EU and that top six right now are those two. And
yeah,
I don't know if Julio's upside is higher than either Ducky or no numbers.
Yeah, I think Julio's a bit more of a question mark than Spudio, yeah. And what I was really gonna say is I think the rest of the roster is solid individually, and if they need a shot caller, not who isn't going to be Tings, then I think they're going to struggle. Tings or Fails. Then I think they're going to be struggling no matter who they bring in for mid, because finding experienced mids who can also shot call is probably going to be a very hard deal. I don't see Nulissa, for one, as that type of person. I don't think Stefan is either. And then you're looking at Mr. Nazer, who is Spanish. I don't know. I don't even know how good his English is, to be honest. And Ferrocrict, who's not looked impressive at all this split. So yeah, maybe Lobster's also just on his roster because who else is better than him within the role that he is serving as a shot calling mid?
Right. I mean, maybe Big Man Tings and Ducky can talk Shadow Nightmare out of retirement. I don't know.
He's working for Hyras now, isn't he?
Is he?
I think he is at the Brighton offices that they have.
I wasn't for sure. I know he retired after they lost relegations in the summer.
Let me check his Twitter real quick. Shadow Nightmare.
But Big Man Tings and Ducky were on that season 3 Dignitas team with Shadow Nightmare, so
yeah, he is working for Hyras.
He's the best. If he's the best option, maybe have those two talk him out of retirement. I don't know.
Yeah, just ask him if Hyras is paying him more than he would be paid playing in the SPL. Also, he is British, so he would have a full British team. Let's think about how glorious it would be.
But the moral, basically, what we're getting at is Energy won the Gauntlet, and they looked like the only team that deserved to win the Gauntlet.
Yeah. That's
They did. We
totally true.
We both predicted Energy to win the EU Gauntlet, so there's not a huge surprise there. They did what it turned out exactly how we thought it would be.
Yeah, I expected Valence to be a bit stronger, but sure. Let's move on to the NA side then. Well, the first game that we saw there was ALG, the 8th place out of the SPL against Salsa Squadron, the Challenger Cup team. And yeah, it went in a bit of a different direction than I think a lot of people were expecting.
I think it went in the direction that it was supposed to go, that it was going to go from the very start.
Yeah.
If you're thinking this ALG team was going to show up and play well at the Gauntlet, I think you might want to go check into a mental health hospital. Because this team looked done. They looked like they didn't even want to play. And
yeah.
I attribute that all 5 players are very strong. But let's look at the roster. They have a jungle, they have a solo laner, they have a support, and then they have 2 hunters. And no real mid laner. And here in North America, in a game we like to call football, the NFL, there's a saying that if you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't really have a quarterback. Yeah. So if you have 2 hunters, then you don't really have a mid laner. It's the same concept. If you have 2 of the same players of the same role on the team, then you can't expect them to be have a good mid laner. And Oceans for the split really been impressive in one game, and he was on, I believe, at Kernanos mid lane. So he was playing a hunter in the mid lane. And it's the only game that I can think of that he really looked good in that middle lane on.
Yeah, and I think this is an issue that has been plaguing them since this roster was really put together, right? Because even Matt Yankee was not the best mid, was not the mid that a team that is trying to compete for LAN spots, which they obviously were in the summer, needs, right? And, well, Oceans didn't turn out to be the solution to the problem either. And yeah, switching them around, I think, really hurt the team overall, instead of deciding to pick up a different mid that is actually a mid that actually plays well on the mages instead of just on the hunter mids.
I mean, even if they had 2 weeks into the split switched it back to where Matt Yankee was the mid, I think this team ends up in a better position than they are right now. But they stuck with Oceans in the mid a little bit too long. And Oceans is not a bad player. He's a good hunter player. He's just not a mid lane player. And you're right. If you're looking for a team that wants to compete for land spots, you need somebody in the mid lane that is comfortable on the mages and can really use Raijin to his full effectiveness, or use Soul to her full potential. And uh, they took MLC Stealth off the roster at the beginning of the year and brought in Met Yankee. And then after 2 splits, they decided Met Yankee in the middle wasn't working, so let's put him in the middle and let's put Oceans, or we'll put Oceans in the middle, and we'll put Met Yankee in the Hunter role. Not a good call on my part. In my opinion, I think maybe the best makes this team a lot better, but
Yeah.
that's was not my call. I just think they stuck with a team decision that was obviously not working after the first 2 weeks of the split.
Yeah, and I can understand trying the move, right? I just, with many moves that NA has made, don't understand the timing of them. I think the 1 split they gave him to become a mid wasn't going to be enough for him to actually do it, and he obviously didn't.
No. Because better players like Baskin and Anister, they're just now reaching their potential in that mid lane, and they've been in the mid lane for the entire season.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Asking Oceans to do it in 1 split was a terrible decision, because it's going to take more than 1 split to be able to effectively find your groove in that mid lane.
Yeah, and that's why I think the timing is bad, because at the start of the split, or no, at the start of the season, I think this is a good move. Even at the start of summer, I think this is a good move. Once you notice that Met Yankee's just not going to be doing enough in the mid for you in the summer, right? Maybe after the first 2 weeks, or after the 3rd week where you're starting to drop off, you can decide to make a switch. Again, I don't understand why the move is done going into the fall. Going into the fall, I think you need to put together a roster that you know has the potential to be good. Like I've said many times already, and you need to just bang on the rest of these players really fitting together, right? And bringing in the best would have been that move.
I think we both agree that the fall split is not a time to be experimenting with stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
You need to have somebody there established that and looking to improve throughout the split, and not, hey, if we move this guy here, is it going to work? It's not a split in which you want to be experimenting. You want to be dialing in for super regionals and hopefully making it to Worlds.
Yeah, the teams that experiment in the fall are mostly going to fail. The teams that experiment in summer and spring can find a true recipe for success. And I think there are examples of this, right? Again, looking at Dig as the prime example, who threw together this super team and it turned into something great. Looking at United, who have just managed to build a team that is working great. And again, even those teams, those two top 2 NA teams, they've made changes to bringing players into a role where they didn't seem like the best player in their respective roles, right? When bringing in Aquarius instead of Divios in the case of LG, and bringing in, who was it, Venenu? Instead of the best in the case of United. But those 2 players are at least established solo and mid players, respectively.
And another team I want to point out that you failed to list, but very much goes along this narrative, is Elevate. I mean, we bashed them early in the split for removing Nulissa for somebody like Death Panther, but Death Panther had an entire split in the mid lane to practice, and so they made that move in the fall split. knowing that they had a mid laner, a person who knew the role and knew how to play the role and had some experience in the SPL in that mid role to bring in.
Yeah. I'm still waiting for a passive meta where this team's gonna fall apart again.
But I do want to make a point that Weekend going into the Challenger circuit, which I hope he does, is probably the dream scenario for Hi-Rez.
Oh yeah, totally. I think
Because
Incon is playing there as well, right?
yeah, Incon's going to be playing in the Challenger circuit. I hope Final K finds an SPL team because Final K is just too good of a player to be in the Challenger circuit. But these streamers like Weekend and Incon, the followings that they have, in Weekend's case, his ability to promote the sponsor along with his own stream, his own stream, is going to draw attention to that Challenger circuit more than if he was still in the SPL. I think as a player, Weekend would want to be in the SPL, but I think Hi-Rez is getting exactly what they need if Weekend decides to play in the Challenger circuit. Just because of the amount of exposure that he brings and the following that he brings is going to make that league so much more watchable by people on Twitch. Like they're going to want to watch the Weekend, and it's going to get exposure for the players that he's playing with and against. And so I think it helps the game, and I hope Weekend realizes it. I think it helps the game with him being in the Challenger circuit because he brings so much exposure to that. And so there is a upside to ALG going down into the Challenger League next year.
And I think you're making a point there because a lot of the people, or I think most of the people who are watching the SPL are watching it to just watch good Smite. And because the Challenger Cup is the level below it, the reason why you'd really be watching Challenger Cup is because you're interested in the people who are playing in it, and a lot of people are interested in Weekend, so I think a lot of people are going to watch that. And the large majority of people who are watching SPL right now aren't going to stop watching just because Weekend's gone, I think.
Yeah, and you're going to have players in the Challenger circuit next season that are known for their time in the SPL, and that alone is going to elevate the play in the Challenger circuit. And just by having, you wouldn't notice that if you had no reason to watch. Weekend is a player that, love him or hate him, he's a very polarizing figure in the community, but people want to watch him, and sponsors want to sponsor him.
See,
and
now,
so you're going.
Now we just need to bring in DM Brandon as well.
Well, I will say on that front, I will say DM Brandon deserves another shot at casting for Hi-Rez.
No, I meant as a player in the Challenger Cup.
I know. As a challenger, I know what you're getting as a challenger player, but I think on the DM Brandon front, that's the only thing I'll say on the DM Brandon front is he has served his time. He made a mistake. He was punished for that mistake, and now he has served his time. If you want him back, I think he is a lot better caster than Anatoly is. So give him a shot if he. And that's the only thing I'll say. But Salsa Squadron, we'll move on to Salsa Squadron now because they're the ones that too old ALG, and it's not. I don't want to talk anymore about the ALG set with Salsa Squadron because I think that was kind of a we've already talked about. ALG just looked done and was ready to call it a season and ready to move on to next year. and so they really. I don't want to say they let Salsa Squadron win, but it really looked like they weren't fully invested in trying to win that set.
Yeah, they
But
did
in the
troll. They did troll in their last set in the SPL. In their last game in the SPL, they did troll. So it's not too unexpected that they didn't look very serious in this set, and they didn't play like it either.
Allegiance looked like they were done. That's the quickest and shortest way we can put it. They looked like they were tired of playing Smite this season. So
yeah.
Salsa Squadron, on the other hand, with the very Astro Authority-like run, putting ALG down, Cryptic went to 3 games with Salsa Squadron, but Salsa Squadron was still able to win that, and then Salsa Squadron took Noble, the eventual winners of the Gauntlet, to 3 games as well. So it was Salsa Squadron looked impressive, and Sops and Sheikah, yes, we know them from their time on Flashpoint, and they were kind of a running joke on this show, but they've improved, and I liked what I saw from them this weekend. Again, though, a lot like the Spudio and Julio talk, who are they going to replace? Who will they beat out in the SPL? Especially with players like Vedium in that 100 row, or the best in that mid row, and now we have Final K on top of Divios to talk about potentially being free agents. I mean, it's going to be very hard for Shops and Sheikah to find a spot in the SPL next split. But they're definitely improved enough to where I think you can look at them. If this was an 8-team league still, you definitely have to look at them if you're putting together a team to play in the bottom half.
Yeah, I think so as well. Like, considering they did just beat the bottom 2 SPL teams, so they might have been able to do the same thing in relegations, right? And that had been the case, we would be seeing them in an 8-team SPL next season. And obviously, I think there's not a lot of candidates as far as moving up is concerned, just because of the people who went down and the specific issues that those 2 teams that are dropping out of the SPL had, whereas the same issues aren't really there for the teams ahead of them. I think Noble might make to look roster changes still, and I think Vigilant might be looking to do the same, but the core issue they seem to have is probably going to be the mid lane, right? Even though Moswell did look good overall this split, I think he's still one of the weaker members of the team, probably the weakest one, unless you really want to put a lot of the blame on Webben. And I think the same thing can be said for Vigilant, where Akilla the Hun is not a great mid laner either. Issue is, look at Salsa Squadron and their mid's not particularly good. Look at Cryptic, their mid's not particularly good. Look at ALG, their mid's also not particularly good. And there's the best out there, so not too many open spots, really.
Yeah, the key is the best, especially in terms of Sheikah. Because if Sheikah is going to get looked at by a team like Noble or Vigilant, the best is going to get looked at first. The best wants to play, he's going to get, he's going to get the first tryout, or he should, right?
Yeah, totally.
Like, you're all if you're calling the best players in the league and you're calling like the best free agents and that are out there, for the mid laner in North America, the best is going to get the first call. And so whatever team wants to maybe look at Sheikah is going to have to understand that the best is going to get looked at first. And so the same issue goes for Sops, and as far as Vedium is concerned, Vedium is going to get that first call over Sops. But they're both They both played well enough this weekend, carrying Salsa Squadron, in my opinion, to the as far as they went.
Yeah, totally.
Yes, Bra and Young Lad and Mineral looked fairly good, but it was all based. It was all on the back of Sheikah and Sobs, and so I'm giving Sheikah and Sobs the credit for their run this weekend.
Yeah, and I think that's the important part. Why I don't think many people on this team are going to move up, because the people who did look best have too much competition, and yeah, it's going to be hard for them, right? Regardless of what else happens. Vicium, big candidate for any open spot in the ADC role, as well as obviously the two ADCs of Allegiance, right? They're individually still good players, especially in the ADC role and not in mid, and I could easily see teams picking them up over a guy like Sobs as well, just because we haven't seen enough good performances out of Sobs.
And speaking of the two ADCs for Allegiance, I think if Allegiance decides to stick with this roster and bring in Sheikah for the Challenger circuit, I think they could be top. We know that the Challenger circuit is going to get a Gauntlet next year, like a lot like we saw this year, where the top Challenger circuit is going to get to be able to chance to play in Super Regionals and go to the Worlds by making it through a Gauntlet. I think given an entire year Sheikah on that team with Weekend and Cyclone Spin and whichever ADC they want to keep, I think you could see them next year being the top Challenger circuit team and giving these teams like Noble and Vigilant a run in the Gauntlet next year for Super Regionals. So Sheikah is a much improved player than where he was at when we first saw him on Flashpoint.
Yeah, well, there's no other direction than upwind from this original Flashpoint roster. So yeah, but yeah, he's definitely improved, and I think we've seen enough good performances out of him to the point where we can say that he is a mage, a mid laner that can show up in important sets, right? He did it in this one, for instance, and if that is the case, then a Gauntlet run is definitely possible. I don't know how good he would be inside an actual split, right? Because in a split you play a lot more games than you do in a sort of Gauntlet format, and if you have a bit of inconsistency there, it's going to really hurt you, because you're not going to find consistent wins that you need to find. Whereas in a Gauntlet, you can get through with a hot streak. And I think Sheikah can definitely have some of those. But yeah, in the end, obviously, was enough to carry them forward against Cryptic. Our picks to make it through to Super Regionals, you know.
Your pick. My pick was Vigilant.
Well, we were both wrong then.
Yeah, we were both wrong. But before we move on to Cryptic, I want to point out the fact that Salsa Squadron first picked Athena every game, except for the one game she was banned, and that was the one game Cryptic was able to win.
Yeah.
Why do you think Athena was such a high-value pick for this team? I mean, and why do you think we didn't see more bans on the Athena? Because it was clearly obvious. It was obvious. I mean, they made it fairly obvious that if she was available, they were going to first pick her.
They banned her in 2 games, according to the post-match discussion. And they lost the last one. So they did everything right. They did what they needed to do by banning Athena. Still lost the last game.
But she was she was first picked in every chance that they had to pick her.
Yeah, that is the case, and it was also the case, especially against Noble when they faced them, right? And yeah, I think a part of the reason is because can you really afford to ban an Athena every game? Because you are giving up such valuable picks to the other team as well, right? They got Ganesh in both of the games where Athena was banned. And if you're giving that pick up, it's going to hurt you. Or at least it should in theory. And it did one game. In the other game they won convincingly, right? But I don't think the Athena should have been valued as highly for a Salsa Squadron as it was. I think... I don't know if... I think they got a bit lucky on the fact that that they still won these sets while really tunneling in on getting the Athena. Because she's not that important of a pick for them, I think. They look good in a game without her. They looked amazing in a game without her.
I think the Athena was first pick so often. Younglad was the focus for the bans, especially after his Amaterasu game. Both, I believe he played her in the jungle both games against ALG, and so Cryptic started focus banning him out, even though the Athena was first picked every time. And we saw when Mineral got Athena, he was able to use his taunts and the global presence that she brings. That really gave them advantage. I think Athena can give you an advantage in certain ways, especially with the global pressure and her taunt being on such a low cooldown. That she's not a top must-have support pick right now, but she's still a valuable option if you want to pick her up. And if much for the reason that Athena keeps getting banned out against Pain de Beyond, if a player is so effective on that god, then just take them off that and see what they can do on the other ones.
See, I don't like that sort of strategic approach. I think it's better to try and find a method to counter it, unless it is already a god that you can afford to ban, right? Pain is great on Ganesh. Ganesh is a god you can afford to ban because Ganesh is one of the best supports in the game right now, with the likes of Fafnir and with the likes of, who else am I thinking about? Terra, probably. Against when you're banning out a god that is not a high priority pick in general in the first phase, instead, right? You are putting yourself in a bad position because you're giving up another valuable pick to the opponent, and I don't think Athena as a character, regardless of how she is played, is powerful enough to warrant a ban.
That's what I'm getting at, though. Who's the more valued pick? I mean, just right now, who's the more valued pick, Athena or Amaterasu? Probably the Athena, but you're banning out the Amaterasu instead of the Athena. So if you're going to use a ban on the Amaterasu, why not just use that same ban on the Athena?
They didn't actually ban her all that much. They didn't ban her in game 1. She got picked by Salsa Squadron. They banned her in the second phase in game 2, and then they didn't ban her at all in game 3, and she wasn't picked at all. So, I don't know. If you were banning the Amaterasu instead, yeah, I would totally agree with you. I think you need to ban neither of those gods. You just go with the top picks instead, or the gods that are your top picks as a team, right? And win the game based on that. You can't waste two bans trying to counter, or you can't waste a ban. Yeah.
We see a lot with these SPL teams against the Challenger Circuit teams. these SPL teams focusing out bans targeting a certain player because they want to take them off of comfort picks because they feel like their comfort picks give the challenger circuit teams a better chance to win. And if you can take them off their comfort picks, whether they're necessarily top picks in the meta, is not important to the SPL teams when they're playing against in the Gauntlet against these challenger circuit teams, because they just want to take them off their comfort picks and not give them the advantage of being on something they're comfortable with.
Yeah, I think the way that works, or the times when that works, is because whoever is picking that god has a shallow god pool. I wouldn't necessarily say that Mineral had a shallow god pool. Of course, his best god was Athena this weekend, but his Ganesh was also good. If you can secure Ganesh instead of Athena for him, or if you can even force both bans, you are again giving yourself an advantage, or you're not giving up much and the other team's forced to give up a lot by banning Athena. And yeah, counter picks, counter bans, they work, but I think they mostly work if someone is just an expert at a god, right? The best example I think there is Marvels with his stupid Rama. That has just been banned in every game that Marvels has ever played in the SPL, which weren't a lot, but there were some, and well, you first ban Rama because Marvels was only half as good on any other hunter than Ram. And I think most of the target bans are still turning into top picks at least. Right, we saw Energy banning away the Ratatosker. You would also ban away the Ratatosker against Twig, because Twig's Ratatosker is amazing. But it's still a top pick regardless of whether you are playing against Twig or not. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, I understand the argument for both sides. I mean, but if multiple players on the team have a comfort pick in one god, and they're going to be focusing that one character above everything else, I think taking that character away from them, because you're by banning out the Athena, you're target banning multiple players on the team, right?
Yeah.
So that's if multiple players on the team value one god, then take that away from them, because it hurts multiple players, and that's what you're trying to do, especially in the second banning phase, is you're trying to target out somebody that you don't win. Like if their support's not picked up in Ganesh and already banned, you're going to ban Terra against Jeff Himla. You're probably going to ban Fafnir against Trix Tank. You're probably, you're focused banning out anyway, or you're going to focus ban out in that second banning phase anyway. So just, hit multiple players with one ban.
Yeah. And I understand banning picks like that in the second phase, right? That's not something I will ever say anything against, because in the second phase, most of the picks that you absolutely need to have out there that your team's just not going to be comfortable playing against, or that are just too strong flat out, are going to be gone. And at that point in time, you really focus on what roles they have left to pick for, and what players are playing these roles and what gods they are good with, and you ban away those gods, and you look that you yourself are getting the picks that you want. And if you're banning Athena there, it makes sense. They were first picking her, so it wouldn't have done anything. You wouldn't have been able to even ban her at that point in time. But again, I think if they are shoehorning themselves into picking Athena first every game, you use that advantage that it gives you, instead of trying to put yourself at a disadvantage by actually banning it away and having them get a Ganesh instead, right? I think you play towards your strengths, and instead of trying to counter theirs necessarily within picks and bans unless it is in the second phase.
Again, I go back to a lot of the past matches we've seen against Challenger Cup teams and SPL teams. The meta is not as important as banning out comfort picks. We've seen it multiple occasions now that SPL teams feel like they have the skill advantage, but they don't want to give the players on the Challenger Cup teams any kind of comfort, and they want to take them off their comfort. So maybe if you go with that thought process again, we might not see Salsa Squadron make it as far as they did, but the teams focused on the meta bans of Nemesis and Zerket and RDO and these top priority picks that you want to get off your team instead of traditionally just banning out comfort picks against the circuit or the Challenger circuit teams. So, but we did see Noble get 2 wins against the Athena this week, and so I guess it wasn't that huge of that huge of a pick for him.
Yeah, see, that's what I mean as well. I think Noble played it right by not banning the Athena, letting her be first pick, and instead focusing on putting down or on getting the good picks themselves, right? They did secure themselves a lot of good picks every game with the Hu Yi, which was one of the most important ones, or with their respective solo laners in either Walrus on the Herc or on the Osiris, right? And I think those are picks that are massively more valuable than an Athena support or jungle. I think that's what ended up working out for them in this set, as well as obviously individually, this Noble roster's arguably a lot better than the Salsa Squadron one.
Well, you could also make that argument for Cryptic, and we saw Cryptic lose to the same Salsa Squadron.
Yeah.
But is Bra as good as a Fine? Okay, no. Is he as good as Walrus? No. But you got to look at the rest of the team, I think, and the thing that Noble did well against the Athena is that they banned out the lot of the picks that she's good with, that she can use her taunt to set up well for. And I think that's how Noble really did it, because it's just, if you take these gods that she pairs up well, like Poseidon, like Raijin, and you take them off away from the team, then she really only becomes less effective than what she would otherwise do. I think Wowie picking up the Hoagie on multiple occasions, being able to really outbox Sops and put Sops on a bad position, really made the Athena pick not worth it in some of those games against Noble. Moswell had good games. Wubbin overextended a few times. Like, if they want to do anything in the wild card round coming up at Super Regionals, Wubbin has to be kind of reined in just a little bit, and let Wubbin be Wubbin, but don't let him overextend to the point where he's dying and you're getting put in 5v4s, because against a team like the only other team we know in the wild card round right now is Energy, and against the team, if you're overextending into a 5v4 or making it a 5v4 against an Energy team, you're really hurting yourself at that point. So the best bet is if
now that I think about it,
rein in.
I want to say something. Now that I think about it, Woman and Raffer are really similar in that regard.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I see that.
Move on.
Yeah, but either way, Wubbin Wobbin is a up and down support. He looks good and then he looks bad and if but there is a reason Ataraxia picked him up for the Energy Invitational. He obviously with the other options on the table at that time that he picked up Wubbin, he thought he made a better choice by picking Wubbin than he would. Remember Polar Bear Mike was available at the time. Jigs was available, and he still picked Wubbin. So, but Wubbin needs to be kind of what Scream was in the summer. They need to pull him back to where he's not hurting the team. But in the set against Vigilant for Noble, yes, it was 2-0 for Noble, but I think it was a good set overall. I think Noble really pulled away from them at the end. There was just a few mistakes from Vigilant towards the end of both games that really caused Noble to grab on and take control of the game. We gave Mirage a hard time last week, saying we don't know if he's going to be as good with this team as Grave could be. Mirage played really well this weekend in both games. The team, Vigilant, didn't play bad, didn't look horrible. Noble just played better. And for me, you have to look at Skeledon there. I mean, yeah, Skeledon's. I made this comparison earlier between Skeledon and Adapting, saying that they're both fairly similar in their importance to their teams, but they do it a different way. We saw what was it? Skeledon go 1-8 on the Nija, but was 100% had 100% participation in his team's kills.
Yeah,
so
he
went
the 0 to 11, and his team had 15 kills.
Yeah, so he was a big setup member. You know, that's what Skeledon does. He's the setup guy for the team, and when he's having good initiations and good overall games, his team plays better and looks so much better than when he's off and having a bad team. That's kind of the same argument that you made, but that we made earlier for Adapting. When Adapting is having a good game, Energy looks better, looks a lot better. Same thing.
Yeah.
If Skeledon's having a good game, even if the stats or if the slash line is not looking like he's having a good game, if you can visually look at his at just the eye test by watching him play and not looking at the slash line, if you can say that he's having a good game and his initiations are great, then Noble is going to have a good chance at winning that game.
Yeah, I think another player you can compare him to is Twig, right? Because Twig is usually not a carry jungle. He is a setup man, and Skele in a lot of ways feels like a setup man as well. And when he's able to set up the rest of his team, they find success. With Energy and Adapting, it's usually just Adapting, going off and killing everyone is how they find success. And that's the main difference between the two, as you said. And
yeah, Adapting has a lot more carry potential than Skeledon. Skeledon's a much better setup. And you compared him to Twig. Yeah, he's much more setup oriented, like Twig is, and not the hard carry that Adapting is. But he's just as important as Adapting is to the Energy team, because the team plays well, so much better when Skeledon is playing well.
Yeah, and again, I think the comparison to Twig fits there as well, because
but
a lot of what Obey does is also relying on Twig showing up.
You can make the argument that if Twig is having a bad game, that that Ataraxia or Pretty Prime or Millsy can step up to the point that Twig doesn't have to necessarily have a good game every game. That there's something else, that there's somebody else on the team that can do it. Energy has that ability too with Yemen and Emilito. But it's more of on the back of Adapting that they find their wins. And with this Noble team, it's more on the back of Skeledon that they find the most of their success.
Yeah.
despite Wowie being a good player and Walrus being a good player and Wubbin being for the most part, a fairly good support, but like we said, needs to be reined in from time to time. And Moswell is still improving. So I don't think we've seen enough from Moswell to say that he's particularly hurting this team or helping this team one way or the other. But Skeledon is the linchpin, right? I mean, he's the guy you're looking at. If he's having a good game, then Noble's going to have a good shot at winning.
Yeah, definitely.
Or at least going to be able to compete with in the games, because we saw them compete. I believe they had a fairly close matchup with what was it? Not Space Station, but Trifecta, and very close matchups against Trifecta. And most of that was on the back of Skeledon.
Yeah. I can look it up if you want me to. Which game they had a close matchup in.
I think it was Trifecta, because I remember E United blowing them out, and I remember Luminosity blowing them out.
Yeah, they did also get 2-0'd by Trifecta, from what I just saw.
What was the game? Were the games close?
See, I don't have that type of memory. So I can't tell you, honestly. I do not remember every single game I watch.
But long story short, Skeledon is a major part of Noble's success.
Yeah, that is something we can totally agree on. And I think if he can keep that same type of form where he is setting up the rest of the team, and if Wowie as the big follow-up guy, I think even a bigger one than Moswell necessarily is, can then find the damage necessary off of those initiations and off of those sort of facilitations. That's a fancy word, I know. If he can then find the damage, then I think this team can look good, like they did this weekend, obviously.
And we made it a point last week in saying that Noble could win the Gauntlet if Skeledon played well, and Skeledon played well, and Noble won the Gauntlet. Even though you had Cryptic and I had I had Vigilant winning, we both said if Skeledon played well, that Noble would have a good shot at winning. And so Skeledon played well, and hey, guess who won?
Yeah, he's been the player that has really gone missing a lot in the online portion of the split, right? Well, we're still in the online portion, but in the regular split. And I think that's what really put them down as much as they were put down, right? They dropped from being in close contention for a DreamHack spot in the summer, or at least having still a big shot at it, to now being completely out of it, I think, during week 5 already. Or at least having to have several things go perfect for them in order to still have a chance at actually making it to Super Regionals directly. And
I think where this team is at now compared to where they were at the end of the summer split, Aquarius leaving caught them off guard. Stealth retiring caught them off guard, and then they used this split, or for most part the online portion of the split, to get comfortable with having Walrus and Moswell on the team. And now that they're going to Super Regionals, can they make noise? Yes. They are a good enough team to make it to Worlds. With the competition that they'll be playing against, it's going to be hard for them. But for the most part, I think I saw this split as just them getting comfortable with the new players on the team. because if you remember, I was high on this Noble roster coming off that summer split. I was very high on them, and I thought that they could make a shot at a top 4 spot. But with the roster changes they had, just getting comfortable in most part, getting comfortable with newer players, where ALG did it with new roles. I think it was easier for Noble because they had players that knew how to play that role, and so just getting comfortable with Moswell and Walrus on the team was a big part of this split. And you heard, if you've watched any of the past couple weeks, Aggro, F. Hindu Man, they've all said that over the last 3 weeks, this Noble team was playing a lot better than they had before. And so it was just a matter of time and just a matter of them getting comfortable with one another. So do not be surprised if Noble is the best North American team in the wild card and have a shot at making it to Worlds, because they are good enough to do it. They just needed time.
Yeah, I think going up against the EU opposition's always going to be tough, especially with how with the teams that are going to be guaranteed basically to be in the wildcards bracket now, right? With one of Dig or Rival, and then with Energy as well.
Elevate and Energy, yeah.
Yeah, most likely Elevate, right? They might beat Obey.
It might be Obey, which if that's the case, good night, Noble, because Obey's going to make one of those spots. It's most likely, from what we expect, it's most likely going to be Elevate, and then either Dignitas or Rival with Energy.
Yeah. We're going to talk about that in a separate episode as well, obviously.
I'll wrap it up. I'll wrap this part up just by saying, does Noble have a chance at beating those 3 teams? They're good enough to do it. I just don't know if it's the right time to do it, because I think they match up well against Elevate. It's Dig, Rival, and Energy that I could see them struggling, mightily with.
Yeah.
So it with only 2 teams getting that wild card spot at Worlds, it's a long shot that Noble makes it. They can make it. They're good enough to make it. But I would still probably take 2 of those EU teams over Noble.
Yeah, obviously, I think so as well.
I don't know if you caught this, but Hindu Man said that he expects 4 teams from the EU to make it to Worlds, but he expects North America to win Worlds.
Yeah, well, hey, Hindu's been wrong before. I think, at least. Listen, we've talked about his power rankings a lot, haven't we? And we disagree with most of the stuff in there, or at least a lot of stuff in there. So you can't you can't criticize Hindu on one statement and then.
Okay, that's a fair point. But if Hindu were here and Hindu could defend himself right now, he'd probably tell you to shut up. I'm a god at this game. I know what I'm talking about, and you're trash, and you don't know what you're talking about. And that's the best BM Hindu Man I can do right now.
Hindu. See, that's why we need a full British team, because they're just all gonna be Hindu mans basically.
All right, well let's talk about MVPs.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything else to discuss, right? So MVPs.
Oh, do you want to go first, or should I go first?
I can do them first now because I just picked them out. So yeah. My MVP for the EU side is going to be Adapting, because, well, he had 4 out of 5 good games this week, and that is good by Adapting standards nowadays. And right there, they are obviously the team that won. He was by far the best looking player, or the player that looked best in his team, with his receding hairline, obviously. And you could have given it to Emilito as well. He was probably
Now,
the player that looked second best on energy.
is it a receding hairline, or is he just pulling it out of frustration?
Could be both. See, I think if you're pulling it out, no, it does make sense, right? You would get sort of like a part left in the middle because you're not really going to tear it out in the middle. Huh. And it makes sense. They started losing and his hairline's gone back.
He goes Super Saiyan and he rips his hair out. Yeah.
Don't Super Saiyans get like more hair? See, I'm not too much into Dragon Ball or whatever that is. Is it Dragon Ball? Please tell me I didn't just insult half of our audience.
Dragon Ball is correct. You're right.
Okay, good. Good. Yeah. See, I'm not too much into that, so I don't know how hair works when you go Super Saiyan. I'm pretty sure it turns blonde for that one dude. But that's all I know. Anyway. Moving on before this turns into any more of a shit show. My MVP for NA is going to be Wowie. As I said, I think Skila is setting up a lot of stuff, and I think Wowie is the main player on this noble roster that has been able to really follow up off of that, and that deserves just as much recognition as Skila's initiations, I think. And Wowie, right? He is a rock as compared to Skila. Skila's inconsistent. He is not going to show up every game, and he's not going to facilitate Wowie every game. When he does, Wowie looks good. When he does not, Wowie still looks like a decent hunter. And I think when Skila doesn't show up, he does not look like a decent jungler. He just looks like a bad one. I think that's the main difference, and I think in this specific weekend, they both showed up equally. And I'm still giving the credit to Wowie a bit more.
Well, and for me, my MVPs, for the EU side, it's adapting as well for a lot of the same reasons you've already discussed. He looked better than we've seen him look in a very long time, and for 4 out of the 5 games he played this week, which is good now for adapting standards. We don't usually see 4 good games from him in such a short span. So he was a major part of the reason why they were able to win the EU side this weekend. And for NA, I do agree with you when you say Wowie is probably the most consistent member of the team. Even when Skeleton doesn't show up, he looks good. But I think when you think of a most valuable player, which is what the acronym MVP stands for, with the arguments we've already made about Skeleton and how important he is to this team and what the team does after he has his initiations, I got to give it to Skeleton. But I do see your point in saying that Wowie is a strong and the most consistent carry on this team. But again, a lot of what the team does and where they find success is when Skeleton has good games, and his initiation is so good this weekend. And I think without his initiation, I don't think Noble wins the Gauntlet. I think you're probably looking at Vigilance or Salsa Squadron winning this weekend without Skeleton playing as well as he did. So, yeah, my MVPs are adapting and Skeleton for this week.
Yeah. I can understand Skeleton perfectly well. And yeah, it depends on how you really evaluate their performances individually, I think, in this specific weekend, right? And I can see how you can argue that Skeleton had more of an impact this weekend than Wowie did. I just happen to disagree. But yeah, it's friendly disagreement over here. So, what else is there to talk about now that we've done with this?
Absolutely nothing. I'm done. Let's wrap it up. Let's Call it a
Yeah,
night.
it's going to be a short episode, and probably going to be another short one next week as well. We're going to be talking about the teams that were 6th through 8th in the SPL in both regions, right? Obviously, the 2 teams that are going to be dropping out, and the last leftover team that's not going to go to Super Regionals now. And yeah, that's what
So
you can
7,
look
8,
forward to.
5, 7, and 8. In both regions, it's 5, 7, and 8 next week.
Yeah, should have
The 3
specified
that
that.
are not 3 teams that are not going to Super Regionals.
We'll obviously talk about the other ones after Super Regionals, because that's where we're going to see them play the last games of this split, quote unquote, because Worlds is its own thing, really. But yeah, with that being said, that was it from the Tuesday Night Smite podcast for this week. If you did like this episode, you can leave us a like on YouTube or on SoundCloud or wherever else you were watching this. It should only be on those 2 platforms, but, well, if you find it somewhere else, leave a like there and then tell us where it is so we can go hunt it down. Anyway, if you want to be notified when new episodes come out, you can follow us on SoundCloud, you can subscribe to us on YouTube. If you want to see more stuff from us as we post as the week goes on, you can follow us on Twitter as well. We also post links to both episodes when they go up on SoundCloud and YouTube there as well. So it's a sort of central hub where you can follow us for updates about that as well. And yeah, thank you all for watching / listening to this. And thank you, Sabo, for being here with me today to do this show. And with that all being said, good night. Good Smite, everyone.